Materials from the Ekwall-Shanker that we use in the Freedom School evaluation. You'll notice on the top is the San Diego Quick Assessment graded word list. To the left below it are the reading passages that children read. You'll see that there's Form A and Form C. We use Form A for the pre-assessment. We use Form C for the post-assessment. On the right are the score sheets that we use. Again, one for Form A, one for Form C. We'll take a quick look at these. So here's the San Diego Quick Assessment. You'll notice that it's really just a set of graded word lists. By graded, they're just sets of 10 words per list that get a little harder with each progressive list. And so we use the San Diego Quick Assessment at the pre-assessment and at the post-assessment, so the same words for each. And we start each scholar, each student at the pre-primer, and then we have them read the primer, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and so on. And then we take them all the way through the list until they make 3 or more mistakes on a single list. So the way the word lists are scored is any list that a child makes 0 or 1 mistakes on, that's at the independent level. Any word list that a child makes 2 mistakes on, that's the instructional level. And any word list where they make 3 or more mistakes, that's the frustration level, and that's where we stop. So for instance, if you're administering this to a child, you start them on the PP list, they read it, they don't make any mistakes, take them to the next list, the pre-primer list, the primer list, excuse me, and they don't make any mistakes. And let's say they make then 1 mistake on the first grade list, that's still independent. We go to the second grade list and they make 2 mistakes, that would be instructional. We take them to the third grade list. Let's say they make 2 mistakes on that, that's still instructional. And we take them to the fourth grade list and let's say they make 4 or 5 mistakes. We stop there, that's the frustration. And then for that child, when we scored the word list, their highest independent would be first grade, because they made 1 mistake there. Their instructional would be grades 2 and 3, so a range, because they made 2 mistakes on these. And then their frustration level, because they made 4 or 5 mistakes here, would be at grade 4. So to score this, we'd have our independent, highest independent would be grade 1, the instructional would be grades 2 through 3, and the frustration would be grade 4. You know, sometimes you'd think it'd be nice if a child just, would be independent here, instructional here, frustration here. That happens, but sometimes we get a range for the instructional. And sometimes kids, especially kids that are emergent readers, will not give us an independent level. They may make 2, 3 mistakes on the first list or 2, and then we just have to stop after they hit frustration. And it just means that they're not reading independently yet. So we will also run into a few kids, not too many, but a few kids who will read all the way through all the lists, get up to this top list, and not hit the frustration level. So we use the graded word list to determine where we start the passages, but we're looking for that highest independent, the instructional, and the lowest frustration. And that's how we use the word lists. And then that helps us determine where to start the reading passages. The formula for that is we take the highest independent level that they scored on the word list and we go back 1 level, and that's where we start the reading passage. So if you had a child in this case that scored independent, their highest independent was at grade 1, you'd start them on the list, the reading passage before that. And we have some instructions, a guide sheet that sort of reminds you of that. Here are the passages that we have the kids read. Again, there's a Form A that we use at the pre-assessment. There's a Form C that we use at the post-assessment. You'll notice that they're comparable, that is, they're different passages in each form, but they're similar in length and similar in difficulty. Let's take a look at the Form A passages. So each assessor gets a set or two of these. You only need one. The kids don't write on these, but this is what they read from. They just get the passage. We use the graded word list to determine which passage to start them on. But just like with the graded word list, what we want is to get an independent, an instructional, and a frustration score. We use the passages to determine where to start. So here's the easiest passage, the pre-primer. And you'll notice it jumps from pre-primer to grade 1. There isn't a primer, so it goes from PP to 1. And then it jumps to grade 2. And you'll notice these little boxes in the book. That's how you determine what level it is. It's just the number of lines. They use squares. It's just their little code, so it doesn't say a 1, 2, 3. It's not. It doesn't alert the child what level they're on. I mean, they'll know it's an easier or harder passage, but it's our way of knowing. So you can see how the passages get a little longer. They get up to about 100 words. The font gets a little smaller. You'll notice that the vocabulary increases. And so these are the passages we use for the pre-assessment. And again, the Form C looks very similar to this. Here's the Form A and Form C score sheet that we use. So for every child in the pre-assessment, we're going to fill out one of these. Notice it's a packet, so there's a space for you to write notes, the numbers of errors on the word list as the child reads that. And then there are copies of the passages that the child reads where we can do a kind of running record, a simplified one. And then there are some questions we can ask, and then this is a scoring matrix. We'll take a look at that. But you'll get this for each passage. I'm just going to jump forward. Here's a longer passage. This looks like our grade 5 passage. You can note the number of word recognition errors. You get 10 questions with most passages except for the first 1 or 2. And then again, if you turn the page, there's this scoring matrix. And what the scoring matrix does is it's the number of word recognition errors and the number of missed questions. And that you know, if this child made one word recognition error and missed one question, then that would place them there, that little plus sign. We look over here and we would score this child's ability to read this passage at the independent level. And then if we go to this one and have the child is reading this passage, and then we ask these questions, and we can score that using this grid. Now, if the child missed 2 questions and made 2 word recognition errors, we notice that's an asterisk. We go over here and we see that that's at the instructional level. So what we want on these passages is to get a clear independent, a clear instructional, and a clear frustration. Again, like the word list, there'll be a few emergent readers that don't give us an independent. We may start off on this first passage and they read it and they make enough mistakes somewhere where it's at the instructional or even perhaps frustration level. That happens. We'll also get kids who read all the way through. Hopefully we don't start them on that very first passage, but we start them on a passage and they read through. They're good readers, and their score, you know, they don't make many word recognition errors and they answer most of the questions, and they won't maybe give us a frustration score. So that happens. We'll talk about those kinds of instances in training, but again, for most kids, we're going to get an independent, an instructional, and a frustration score, and we write that information here on this cover sheet. So when the child sits down with us, we want to make sure we get their name. We create a scholar ID. There'll be an intern that comes over with a list. Make sure you get that and write it down. You can ask the child what grade they just completed. You can get their gender. We usually just determine that. The date of the test is just the date you administer it. The site, that'll be the Freedom School site like Christ Lutheran is CLC, and we usually use a little abbreviation for each site. Your name is examiner, and it's not do or die, but it's nice to get the start and end time and total minutes. And then when you come up with a graded word list score, the San Diego Quick Assessment, you write the independent, the instructional, and the frustration. Remember that it's this independent level that tells us what passage to start on. We take the highest independent and we go back one. So if a child's highest independent is grade 4, then we would start them on the grade 3 passage. And so probably then, we'd start them on the grade 3 passage. If that's independent, then we keep going forward until we get a frustration score, and we write those scores here. Independent is, we want the highest independent, the instruction, and we want the lowest frustration. Instructional is whatever falls between. And again, we'll talk about those times when, in training, when those scores don't come out in a linear fashion. There's also a place to take some notes. Like if you faced a challenging situation, like it really appeared to you that the child was a second language learner or was just having a bad day, you might note that here. You might make some general observations here that would help us understand the score that you created. So this is the form we write on. We fill out one of these at the pre-assessment for each child we assess, and then at the post-assessment, we use the Form C. Notice it looks exactly the same. It just has, and it has the same word list, but the passages and questions are going to be different. They're comparable, but different. Last thing to share, we have a ESRI administration guide sheet, and this is kind of a cheat sheet with instructions. It just tells you how to start with each kid. You'll use it less and less as you become familiar and do more work with more kids, but it's really helpful. It just reminds you to greet the child and introduce yourself briefly. We want to move quickly, but we want to get off to a good start. Get some information to fill out. It reminds you to get some information to fill out the top of the score sheet. And you can do a quick overview of the process, and we give you this suggested text. You don't have to read it verbatim, and you don't have to memorize it, but you'll become familiar with it. So I might say to a child, in a minute I'm going to ask you to read to me. It's going to take you just a few minutes. We'll probably take 10 or 15 minutes. It's not for a grade, but I want you to do your best. It helps us understand how Freedom School is helping kids with reading. Do you have any questions? Okay, let's get started. And then I can show them. To begin with, I'm going to have you read some words, lists of words. I'll tell you where to start and I'll tell you where to stop. And then here the directions remind you to begin with the PP list and have the child read until they make 3 or more errors on any one list, because that's frustration. They may jump from 1 error to 5 errors. They may, do this one error, 2 errors, 3 errors. It really varies by kid, but it reminds you that a correct response, you can just leave it blank on the score sheet, and you can just put a check or an X next to any word that they make a mistake on. We just need to know if they made a mistake so that you can score it. And then again, here's some suggested text that you can read to the child. Here's some words I'd like you to read. Try reading them even if you're not sure what some of the words are. Let's begin reading, and you can point to the PP list. So once you're done with the graded word list, then there's instructions on how to handle the oral reading passages. It's a reminder to you to begin with the passage 1 level below the highest independent from the graded word list. Cover the passage with a blank sheet of paper. We'll give you that until the student's ready to begin. And then here's, again, some suggested instructions. I got some passages for you to read. Read the first one out loud. If you find some words that are hard to read, just do the best you can and continue reading. It's important to remember what you read, because I'm going to ask you some questions when we're done. And that's an important thing to remind them of, is tell them to read in a way that they're trying to process. You don't have to use the word process or comprehension, but remind them that you're going to ask them some questions and that you're going to cover up the passage or take the passage away. And then reminders to you, keep track of the student's word recognition errors, what we call miscues. Say any unknown, this is important for us, say any unknown word to the student after a 5-second pause, and that counts as a word recognition error. So if a child comes across a word and they don't know how to say it, and they take 5 seconds or more, and you can just ballpark that. Then we count it as an error, but we tell them the word. Cover the reading passage after they're done reading, and then you ask them the questions, score a plus for the correct responses, minus for the incorrect, and then you go to that matrix and count up the number of word recognition errors and the number of questions they missed, and that gives you their score. So, and on the back of this, it's just, here's another passage, read this one aloud, and remember what you read so you can answer the questions, and you keep going until they hit the frustration levels. And then here are some reminders to you on scoring the passages. Score each instance as an error, so any word that they say incorrectly, a word that they skip, or a word that they insert, or a word that they take 5 seconds or more on, or more than 5 seconds, and you'll give them that word if they take more than 5 seconds. So insertions, substitutions, gross mispronunciations, not minor mispronunciations. We have accents and second language learners and regional differences, so cut them some slack on mispronunciations. Repetitions are fine, so if we all sort of stutter step when we read. Also, another thing, do not score self-corrections as an error. That's it. And here are some sort of guidelines on how to mark the miscues. So, as a reminder, here are the materials we use in the assessment. We have a copy of words for the child to read, the scholar to read from the graded word list. This is what we show them, and we have them start on that PP list and move forward. And then here are the materials we have them read. Again, it's just the passage, they don't get the questions. We cover up the passage until we're ready for them to read, and we cover it back up when they're done reading and we get ready to read the questions. So they only have access to the passage when they're reading it. And then these are the materials we write on to note their scores. Here's where we fill out for the word list and get their scores, independent, instructional, frustration. And here are the forms we write on. We do the word recognition errors, what most of us would call a miscue analysis here. We can note those errors, we can note their answers to the questions, and then we use this scoring matrix to determine whether it's independent, instructional, and frustration. And we don't worry about the listening comprehension part. So these are the materials we use. Every assessor will get copies of the word list and the Form A and Form C. We'll give you a notebook that you can put that into, and we'll have these at the site on the day of assessment, Form A or Form C. Plenty of those for us to use.